Nice to have you with us this morning. Sorry, we don't rehearse any of this. We just show up. So whatever happens is a miracle. So we get it right when we get it right, and when we don't, we don't. So happy Easter to everybody who has come online this morning to watch us. I want to thank all my colleagues who've come out this morning to help us put together an joyous Easter service. I first of all want to do a couple of hellos. So I want to say hi to my mother again. She seemed to like that. I haven't seen her for almost a month now. Say hi to my Aunt Shirley, because if I say hi to my mother and I don't say hi to my Aunt Shirley, I get in trouble for that. And to my son Dan, daughter Jessie, their gang, and Nathan, say hi as well. And on behalf of all the other folks who are here, hi to their families as well. So, if you didn't tune in last week and you're just tuning in this week, we are going to have do-it-yourself communion this morning. So while I'm rambling on, if you don't have anything to take communion with, you might want to run and do that now. So you can take any kind of elements in your house at all. Some kind of liquid, preferably something you would normally drink. It can be anything. It's the United Church, so we don't stick to the strict elements. And some kind of bread product, whatever you might have handy, and then we will work into that as the service goes on. I'll tell you how to do that. And Dan wanted me to remind everybody that I drove up this morning, and my two horses that I watch every morning when I come up to church were out in the pasture, and they were facing each other this morning, looked like they were greeting each other. So I think the world is as right as it can be this morning. So happy Easter, whether you're alone at home, whether you're with your family, whether you're on your computer and we're your family for Easter this morning, we're happy to have you here. And God bless you this morning, wherever you are and whoever you're with. So our rousing hymn this morning is Halle, Halle, Halle. It's pretty straightforward. It only has one word in it. So you should be able to, at least by the second or third line, be able to join along at home.
Hallelujah, Halle, Halle, Hallelujah, Halle, Halle, Hallelujah, 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 Halle, Halle, Hallelujah, Halle, Halle, Hallelujah, Halle, Halle, Hallelujah, 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 Halle, Halle, Hallelujah, Halle, Halle, Hallelujah, Halle, Halle, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah.
As you can see on the screens, the invocation for Easter Sunday is Christ has risen, and the response is Christ has risen indeed. Christ has risen. Christ has risen indeed. God is alive. New birth is given. Hope is alive. A new age is dawning. Joy is alive. Redemption is here. Love is alive. Death cannot harm us. We are alive. New life is within us. The church is alive. God's Spirit is within us. Let us celebrate the God of resurrection. So the theme for the service this morning is pushing back the stone, kind of an act of rebellion. The first of the opening thoughts is from an American theologian by the name of John Lewis. He says sometimes you have to not just dream about what could be, You have to get out and push, and you pull, and you preach, and you create a climate and environment to get those in high places, to get men and women of goodwill in power to act. I thought, who would be better on Easter morning than Janis Joplin? Short but very enthusiastic life, lots of energy. And I remember watching an interview with her once, and the interviewer, who was very straight-laced, was trying to get out of Janis Joplin how she wrote her songs. And Janis was kind of puzzled by that, and she said to the interviewer, "What do you mean, how do I write my songs?" And she says, "Well, do you sit down and compose by candlelight? Do you reflect on a pathway?" And Janis just looked at her and said, "I just get up and sing what I feel." It was pretty straightforward. So she said, playing is just about feeling. Playing isn't necessarily about misery. Playing isn't necessarily about happiness. But it's just about letting yourself feel all those things that you've already on the inside of you. But you're all the time trying to push them aside because they don't make for polite conversation or something. And Francis Chan, churches we build only by our own efforts and not in the strength of the Spirit will quickly collapse when we don't push and prod people along. The opening prayer, I'd invite you to pray with me along at home. Let us pray together. Creator God, today we remove the stones from the tomb. As Jesus brings new life into the world, we leave behind the stones that weigh us down and open lives to receive the light and love of that first Easter morning. We remove the stones that seal our hearts from experiencing life. We remove the rock that guarded the tomb. We remove the rock that causes us to stumble. We remove the rocks of discomfort, distrust, and the rock of temptation, which tempts us to carry on with our usual lives. Be with us on this very unusual Easter morning, the one in which your church cannot meet in physical community, but only in spiritual communion. Remind us that we are together. Reach into our hearts and make us one for this brief time as one. Amen. Our communion hymn is "Let Us Tongues and Talents Employ."
Let us talents and tongues employ, reaching out with a shout of joy. Bread is broken and wine is poured, Christ is spoken and seen and heard. Jesus lives again, earth can breathe again, pass the word around, loaves abound. Jesus lives again, earth can breathe again, pass the word around, loaves abound. Christ is able to make us one. At the table he sets the tone, teaching people to live and bless, love and word and indeed express. Jesus lives again, earth can breathe again, pass the word around, loaves abound. Jesus lives again, breathe and breathe again, pass the word around, loaves abound. Jesus calls us to send us out, hearing fruit in a world of doubt. Gives us love to pleasure to share, God Emmanuel everywhere. Jesus lives again, earth can breathe again, pass the word around, loaves abound. Jesus lives again, earth can breathe again, pass the word around, loaves abound.
So we come now to a time of communion, and at this point, usually when we're gathering together in the congregation, I invite everybody to participate. Now, because you're at home in your own living rooms or bedrooms or wherever you are, I don't have to invite you. You can invite yourself. So I would remind you, though, that if you have children present with you, they are indeed invited to participate as well in the United Church tradition. Since the late 80s, we also invite children, even if they're not confirmed or baptized, to participate in the communion service. And as we go through the service, I'll instruct you in the various parts. You will become members of the laity who are designated to officiate at communion. So it'll be kind of an interesting and special arrangement that we shall have this morning, and I will explain more of that as we go along. But we do take it seriously. My understanding of this is that whatever you do at home in the way of communion is exactly what we do here in church. So it is sacred, and it is just as if you were sitting in church here and taking communion with us. So that's the import that I place on it. So I encourage you, if you're participating, to feel that you are in a sacred and in a sanctified place. Before people take communion, they confess before God those sins and errors and faults, things that haunt them from the past, that chain them and burden them, so that they may be relieved, so that when they take communion, they can straightforwardly commune with God in a clear and open mind and heart. So I would invite you to take a few moments in silence and to offer up to God those things which you would like to be relieved of, those things which have burdened you, which have weighed you down, things that you would like to let go of, and offer them to God on this most holy of Christian days. Let us pray. Oh God, we ask that you hear our confessions, and in your love you forgive us and relieve us, and remove those things which are stones from our hearts, and roll them away, and help us to greet this day with new life. In Jesus' name we ask this at this table this morning. Amen. So I'd ask you to follow along with the communion service. The Spirit of God be with you all. Lift up your hearts.
We lift them to God.
Give thanks to our God.
All our thanks, all our praise.
And this is our song, you beyond the galaxies, you under the oceans, you inside the leaves. You pouring down rain, you opening the flowers, you feeding the insects, you giving us your image, you carrying us through the waters, you holding us in the night. Your smile on Sarah and Abraham, your hand with Moses and Miriam, your words through Deborah and Isaiah. You lived as Jesus among us, healing, teaching, dying, rising, inviting us all to your feast. So at this point, I would invite you, if you're at home this morning and you take communion, as we do the words of consecration, that you point at both of the elements as we're saying this. The night in which he was betrayed, Jesus took bread and gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take, eat. This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Again, after supper, he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it for all to drink, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, shed for you and for all people, for the forgiveness of sin. Do this for the remembrance of me." Holy God, we remember your Son, his life with the humble, his death among the wretched, his resurrection for us all. Your wisdom, our guide, your justice, our strength, your grace, our path to rebirth. Holy God, we beg for your Spirit. Enliven this bread, awaken this body, pour us out for each other, transfigure our minds, ignite your church, nourish the life of the earth, make us, while many united, Make us, though broken, whole. Make us, despite death, alive. Our life, our mercy, our might. Our table, our food, our server. Our rainbow, our ark, our dove. Our sovereign, our water, our wine. Our light, our treasure, our tree. Our way, our truth, our life. So in the United Church's tradition and in many other Christian traditions, during times of war, separation, disease, illness, lack of clergy, which happens in remote places, and typically in the United Church we have what's called the ministry of the laity, which is lay people have been empowered to go out and conduct both baptisms and sacraments of Holy Communion. It's a very common tradition in our church, and although nobody, I won't get on a ramble here, so I'll stay in tune. Nobody in our church, surprisingly, has talked about any of these things that I can see. We've been told to stay away from our congregations, we've been told to stay home, we've been told to go online, but nothing of any real theological import. So for you, my congregation, I'm going to offer that this morning. In the United Church, there is a tradition to do this. So you this morning at home will become ministers in the lay form in the United Church of Canada, empowered to consecrate elements and conduct communion in your own home. So the way that is done, we do the words of consecration. You will take the host or the bread or the Eucharist or whatever you're using, and you will say just the words we did before, and I will repeat them again. Take, eat, this is my body given for you. Do this for the remembrance of me. As well, lift up a cup, whatever you're drinking from, and say, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, shed for you and for all people, for the forgiveness of sin. Do this for the remembrance of me. So you have now consecrated the elements in our tradition. They now are part of the communion service as if you were sitting here. Take, eat, the gifts of God for the people of God. So Courtney's going to read from the Gospel of John this morning. It's the most familiar of the Easter morning stories. We often read it when we have a sunrise service, and I must admit, disappointed this morning that we didn't have a sunrise service, even though I hate getting up in the morning. I hate getting up early, but I was quite discouraged because I did wake up early this morning. I looked out the window and thought, well, even though it's raining, it would have been nice to be out there, but we weren't. So we will do that in big style next year. So I'm going to read the story about John. This is a very stylized picture of the Easter morning, of course, because you can see the three crosses in the background. We know the three crosses, or the crosses weren't anywhere near the grave. There's light coming from the grave. There's the women are outside. And the story of John, in every one of the gospel stories, women get to the tomb, not men, but women. All the gospel writers agree on that, but they don't agree on who the women are. And we'll talk about that a little later on in the sermon. And there's a great story when she reads this. You can listen to it. It's John's gospel, of course, and he's the only gospel writer that says that Jesus loved him better than all the other folks. So this picture I always love in one form or another, because when John writes the gospel, he says that the two disciples run to the tomb when the women come. His favorite gospel writer or disciple, John and Peter. And he says they race to the tomb, and I always have this great image of the two disciples racing to the tomb. And why did John put that in the story? Like, it makes no sense. It's not in any of the other stories. And he says not only did they race to the tomb, but he makes a point of saying that he beat Peter to the tomb. So I can only think it's in there for the reason that Peter must have been a faster runner than John, and John wanted to prove a point that he loved Jesus more, because that morning he beat him to the tomb. That's the only reason I can think why it's in there, because it doesn't make any other sense whatsoever as to why that's in there. So I kind of thought that was a great little. So we have one other image here, which again is one of the things that's fascinating is that in John's gospel and some of the other gospels, when Mary sees Jesus, she thinks he's the gardener. Now, it never says why she thinks he's the gardener. She just assumes it's the gardener. But in a bunch of Renaissance paintings, it actually has Jesus dressed up like a gardener with a shovel in one hand and a hat on. And there's no explanation in the text for that whatsoever, but it's this literalism that people attach to the text. So there's a bunch I just put one up, but there's about 12 or 14 of these paintings with Jesus dressed up like a gardener, which doesn't make any sense. So I don't even know how to explain that, but I'm not going to try. Thanks, Courtney.
A reading from the book of John, chapter 20, verses 1 to 18. The resurrection of Jesus. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look and saw that the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed, for as yet he did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at his feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her.
I danced in the morning when the world was begun. I danced in the moon and the stars and the sun. And I came from heaven and I danced on earth. At Bethlehem I had my birth. Dance then whenever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he.
I danced for the scribe and the Pharisee, but they would not dance and they would not follow me. I danced for the fishermen, for James and John, but they came with me and the dance went on.
Dance, dance, wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. I danced on the Sabbath and I cured the lame. The holy people said it was a shame. They whipped and they stripped and they hung me high and left me there on a cross to die. Dance then wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he.
I danced on a Friday when the sky turned black. It's hard to dance with the devil on your back. They buried my bottle and they thought I'd gone, but I am the dance and I still go on.
Dance then wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. They cut me down and I leapt up high. I am the life that will never, never die. I'll live in you if you live in me. I am the Lord of the dance, said he. Dance then wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he.
I always give Courtney the sermon title, and then she comes up with these things that I have no idea what's going to be there. So That's perfect. Don't lose your goat. So I was watching, it's Stephen Colbert, right? I couldn't remember his first name, who does the talk show. And he was doing a show this week, and I mean, he usually has a huge audience, and he was sitting in what looked to be his den by himself with obviously some kind of technical person. And he was telling all his jokes, but there was no laughter. And he kept working through the punchlines of these jokes, but it kind of looked like he was crying. And I thought, I think he's feeling an immense sadness that he's not getting any feedback. And I thought maybe some of these guys maybe would put on a laugh track or something, but he's not doing that. He's just braving it through. And I thought, I know that's hard to do. It's difficult to do because he feels he has a message. I mean, he's not just a comedian. He does political commentary. And I mean, he had some good stuff that night. But he's continuing on to do it with no feedback. And so, for instance, when I wear this jacket once a year at Easter, I expect feedback, and I don't get any here. Well, other than Mike had never seen it before. He thought it was pretty funny. So, and I know now my mother is rolling her eyes at home. And also, I noticed online I got 1 thumbs down a couple of weeks ago. So if I get another thumbs down, I'm going to guess it's because of the jacket. So I just want to say that one of the ways that I have always gotten through hard times is with a sense of humor. And so my humor doesn't always match other people's humor. Usually I can tell on Sunday mornings. It's a little more difficult now. But I appreciate my friends and colleagues who are here this morning to help put the service on. At least I get this much feedback, which is helpful. So, with that in mind, this next image has really nothing to do with the sermon whatsoever. I just thought it was really funny. And in Christianity, we're allowed to do this. So, this is the empty tomb. I'm assuming the woman in the blue is Mary, because she's outside the empty tomb. The people outside are running around yelling, "He is risen." She's looking in the tomb. The linen cloths are on the ground. And she said, "Oh, how many times have I told him not to leave his clothes on the floor?" I think that's funny. I don't know how you guys feel. Exactly, right? So I'll probably get thumbs down for that one too. But anyway, I think it's funny. So, Easter symbols. I picked this one out here because I thought it was this is from a Vacation Bible School slide that I saw online, teaching children about Easter. So, it's got some nice images here. We have the tomb. We have the light inside. We have the domed arch over there. We have a cross up in the background. And we have one of the symbols that we sometimes talk about at Easter, not very often because it's associated with a kind of a pagan symbolism, which are butterflies, right? And butterflies have often been used in Christianity and in other pagan cultures to speak about transformation. The idea that one living creature enters into a state of kind of comatose, some people would call death, and that creature emerges from that state of being wrapped up and becomes a beautiful new creature which bears no relation to the old creature. So butterflies have often been used in cultures as that kind of symbol of resurrection, renewal, transcendence, if you will. So for children, you try to explain that image in kind of concrete terms, right? The question for Christians often becomes at Easter, what does the empty tomb mean for me? And again, the visuals of Easter are quite clear, right? You always have the cross, there's several crosses in the background. You have the rising sun. You have the opening of the cave, the stone. We never hear who rolled the stone away, but the stone is removed, and the tomb is empty, which is supposed to tell us, of course, that Jesus has risen, physically risen, and walked away and left the clothes. It's interesting in all 4 Gospels, and I'll talk about this in a minute too, the conclusions are different in every Gospel. They're not the same. The story doesn't end the same. The only thing that's current and common in the Gospels is that Jesus is marched into trial, that he's convicted, that he's led to crucifixion, and that he's crucified. And after that, the story is varied and different in each of the Gospels. So, again, back on my horse theme. So, I was driving up to Gravenhurst I think it was on Good Friday or last Sunday. So I'm driving by one of the farms I go by, and I'm always looking at the animals. There's some geese and some swans, and some of the ducks have arrived. And I drive by one of the farms. This is not one. I had to look this up on the internet because I didn't have my camera with me. And there is a horse, a very big horse, and a little goat standing face to face. And it's kind of a nasty kind of a day, but it's warm. And as I drove by, I had this funny thought. I thought they looked like they were saying to each other, so what are we going to do today? Right? Are we going to chase each other around? Are we just going to eat? Are we going to enjoy the warm weather? It was like literally they looked like they were locked in some kind of conversation. And then I started thinking about the relationship between horses and goats. Now, I don't know if you know about the relationship between horses and goats, but there is a fascinating relationship. When horses were bred to race, especially for money, one of the problems with them was because they kept getting moved around and put in different stalls and barns that weren't comfortable, especially across the U.S. in the early 20s and 30s. The thoroughbreds, which are highly selectively bred, are very neurotic and jittery, right? Because they're bred to run. That's all. They're bred to be turned on, run around a track, and shut off again. They're not bred for social manners or anything. So somebody discovered that if you put a goat in with a thoroughbred in its little pen, it calms the horse down. So owners started to get goats, and this is what they'll do. You go on the internet, there are a ton of pictures of this, of horses and goats. The goats will get on top of them, they'll walk with them, the horses will follow them around, they'll lick, they'll lay in around each other. It calms these thoroughbreds right down. So I don't know if you knew this, but this is where that expression came from. Don't let anyone get your goat. Because what happened was, when this tradition started, competitors of very highly trained, successful horses would sneak in the night before the race and steal the goat. Right? So the expression, don't let them get your goat, came from horse racing, and they would steal the goat as close to the race as they could, so that the horse would start getting agitated. By the time it was time to race, the horse was useless, because all it was looking for was its companion. So this ridiculous expression of don't let anyone get your goat, it doesn't mean to get you angry. It means that somebody's taken your comfort. Somebody's taken something that calms you down. And this became a kind of an epidemic where they would put guards on the goat so that nobody would steal a goat. And in some ways, the goat started to become more worthwhile than the horse, because the horse wouldn't take well to a new goat. You couldn't just replace the goat, because, you know, like all animals, they're very attuned to sense of smell. So they understood, this is my goat. I don't want another goat. I want my goat. And so I began to think about that in terms of Easter. So today is Easter. What does it mean? It's a time of renewal for each and everything. I mean, we use all the symbols for Easter, right? They're all renewal kind of symbols. We use eggs, right? We use Easter bunnies. We use cookies. Yes, we have some Easter cookies up in the front here. We paint eggs. We haul them out. We do all the kinds of things, flowers, tulips. We have all kinds of lilies, all kinds of things we use that are regenerative, that something has died, something has gone dormant, and it becomes new again. But one of the things about Easter, of course, is what does it mean to you? Now, I thought about this, and I know in some ways I wanted to be light today instead of dark, so I thought we'd look at it in a kind of positive way. So what is going to get your goat? What's going to stop your happy place over this Easter? Obviously, COVID-19 is going to get your goat, right? It's going to, I mean, we are feeling it, as I'm sure all your families are feeling it. I usually see my grandkids at Easter. It's one of the times we get together because it's warm enough to be outside, and we go in the boat, or we go make a fire, or we do something. We're not going to do that this year. We usually sit with the family and have a big meal. Eat too much and drink too much. We're not going to do that this year. You know what our entertainment was this weekend for Easter? One of our neighbors on the street cut down a big tree with one of those lifts. So all of us on the street went out in our lawn chairs and sat and watched him cut down a big tree. You got to be pretty hard off when that's your day's entertainment. And that was the big event on the street, not that and somebody drove by in a van with a bunny costume on. I don't even want to know what that was all about, honking their horn. But that was the big event. So, I mean, the illness in itself, aside from how it does damage, the part of keeping us apart damages our Easter. And we tend to put a lot of import into those kind of holidays. Aging. Sometimes at this time of the year, because spring is here, we may not feel so spring-like. And I know some folks who've been in isolation during the winter in particular and may feel that this spring they're not as spring-like as they were last spring. And this may feel like maybe it's more than a year. And they may not feel, especially with all the isolation and the lack of exercise, this may be tougher this year. And so to think about that and be preoccupied with that is, again, a way of kind of taking away your inner joy. Social isolation is always difficult. And it's more difficult for some people than it is for other people. And I think we're going to find out in the days ahead, it has repercussions. I mean, I found out this week that my wife would be working at home. Now, I don't know how you people feel about that. No, I mean, not my wife's working at home with me, but if you are at home and your wife comes home and works with you. Yeah, and I've got, I'll appreciate your feedback. I wasn't particularly enthused about the idea. Seriously. So, I mean, if I feel that way, and we get along reasonably well most of the time, because we work an hour in each direction away from each other, I think of all the people who have been forced to be home at the same time and have never had that experience before, and have children at home. And all of a sudden, these lives of separation and hurry are all shut down. And they're in the same place at the same time all the time. I know that creates stress. I know that makes life difficult. And yet all of us, when we had children, we think, oh, if I only had more time to spend with my children. If I only had more time to spend at home. And then all of a sudden that happens, you're like, wait, what was I thinking? This is tough. This is not good. I mean, I had to make sure Colleen had proper headphones. So I had to stop listening to her conversations with people at work on speakerphone. You can't sleep through that, folks. You can't. It's really noisy. So I know, it's tough. And lacking a sense of purpose, I think that's why yesterday it was really funny to watch her, because I'm looking out the window, and I got lots of projects to do, and I slowly saw all the neighbors sort of one by one kind of come up to the street while this guy's cutting his tree down. And some of them are neighbors that don't particularly talk to each other all the time. And they were all pretty good at social distancing, they're all sort of yelling back and forth, because of course there's a chainsaw going and the motor of this lift at the same time. So everybody's yelling, right? And everybody wants to laugh and joke, and I thought it's that sense of purpose. All of a sudden they're part of something. Right? Because they're sitting at home feeling like I'm not really part of anything. And it was great for my neighbor, because what they started to do was when branches come down, they went off and picked them up and put them in the trailer. So he got free labor for the whole afternoon. But this lacking a sense of purpose, I think sometimes we're not aware that all the things we do in our lives give us purpose. And even if we complain about them, the driving and the work and all the stuff and all the tension and responsibility, take that all away all of a sudden, and we really have to sort out what we're doing. And it has an effect on people. I know that. So Easter and spring. Doesn't that just make you feel good? Just all on its own. Huh? Shouldn't you have that as your screensaver? Now, bunnies are interesting because bunnies were one of the pagan symbols in the Roman Empire. And it was also a sign of resurrection. So So sometimes Christianity has a little bit of, the whole Easter bunnies laying eggs, those were two symbols from the Roman Empire. And lots of time in church we have a hard time with that, but you can't fight it, right? I mean, that whole Cadbury commercial where there's the Easter bunny laying chocolate, like that makes no sense. Seriously, I'm not the only one who feels that way. I can't be, right? But that goes right back to Roman times and maybe before, because they're both symbols of fertility. And spring is a fertile time. I know the bunnies are busy in my backyard. I don't know what they're doing in yours, but man, oh man, they are busy in my yard. And again, you have tulips and little, it's not a chickadee, it is a nuthatch in the corner on the right. Is that right? I think it's a nuthatch. Please give me feedback about the bird in the corner. And butterfly. Trees in the background, clouds, sun, sprouts coming up from the ground. Winter has gone, spring has come, right? Life is abundant. So I thought a couple more things here for you folks that I thought would be interesting. The mystery of human existence lies not just in staying alive, but in finding something to live for. That's Dostoevsky, by the way, if you can't read that. I took a course in Russian literature. I don't remember very much about it. It was in university. And this, for me, is really interesting around in the New Age story of Easter. It's not the literal belief in the story that's important. It's being personally a part of the story that's crucial. Are we a part of the Easter story? Does it mean anything to us? Does the empty tomb have any impact on our lives at all? Is it a metaphor? Is it a symbol? Is it allegory? Or is it some kind of realized belief that life has a cycle that turns over and turns over? And that out of death and despair and destruction, there is new life which surfaces. And in the midst of that, even sometimes, new life surfaces. So I wanted to put this image up because it's one of my favorite ones. You can understand why. The image in one of the Gospels, all the Gospels end differently. They've got Jesus coming down from the clouds. They've got him in a different body. They've got him with one disciple, two disciples. 3 women show up. 1 woman shows up. He comes, he goes, he walks through walls. If you read, if you're bored this afternoon and you got nothing to do, read the last 3 chapters of each of the 4 Gospels and try and make them fit together. You won't be able to. There's all kinds of stories. But my favorite story is this one. It's when one of the reappeared stories, when the disciples are kind of fed up and they don't know what's going on, so they go back to their old ways. They go fishing. So they're out in the lake fishing, and they look to the shore, and there's Jesus sitting cooking fish. To me, it's one of the most pastoral. It's not magical. He's not coming out of the clouds. He didn't walk through the walls. He's just sitting there cooking fish. And it's early in the morning, and he waves them over. We suppose, you can see in this picture, it's great. He's pointing. I got breakfast over here, folks. Right? And if anybody's ever been out fishing in the morning, cooking fish in the morning is a great thing. So you can just imagine he summons them back, and they sit, and they have breakfast. And they eat fish together, and all the craziness of whatever happened in the last couple of weeks beforehand is past. And they're just friends sitting and eating. And I think the gospel writer who wrote that passage, again, whether it's literal, whether it's true, whether it happened in that manner, whether it didn't happen, whether it happened before or after. The idea that was Jesus saying life goes back to normal. That after all of this craziness and all that you've learned, we still go back to fishing, we still go back to farming, we go back to school, we go back to church, we live our lives, we're changed because we're stronger, we're better, we're more able to cope, we're closer, and I'd like to think in some ways we're nicer, because when you're social distancing, you have to be a lot nicer to people. It's a lot harder to hold open the door, isn't it? Right? I've seen people do it with their legs outstretched and their elbows behind their back, but they're still doing it. Right? We are different people after we go through trauma. I like to think we're better people. And that lovely little story of Jesus cooking fish for his friends, waiting for them to come back in and just saying, it's okay. Things are going to go on. Things are going to be good. And I had to leave you with another schmaltzy picture here because I couldn't resist it. Don't you want that as a screensaver too? I mean, seriously. Who doesn't love jumping little goats? So I just wanted to leave it in. Don't let this get your goat. Don't let this virus be the thing that turns you into a person you don't want to be. Don't give up hope. Don't let socialization keep you away from other people in the ways that you can still communicate. I have had more contact with people that I haven't talked to in 20 and 30 years than I have in 20 or 30 years because of the virus. So it's not that kind of isolation. So don't let it get you goat. Don't let that little goat that jumps around inside you and gives you peace, don't let it do anything to that. Be at peace this year. Amen.
The next piece of music is from the Messiah, I Know That My Redeemer Liveth. My Redeemer liveth. And that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth.
Thank you, Penny. That's lovely. If you would join me in the Easter prayer. Let's pray together. God of resurrection, we cry out to you from a spent world where we know the Good Friday of innocent suffering and death, of night smothering light, of dreams dissolved. We stumble amongst the tombs in our lives and long to find them empty. God of resurrection, we long to sense your presence and feel the pulse of your power. Bring Easter to our hearts and to our lives. For now is Christ arisen, planting life and love in the weary soil of our lives, bringing day to withering soil, restoring hope to the lost. Amen.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
So before we sing our last hymn, which is one of my favorite hymns, by the way, I want to thank everybody who helped out this morning. Andrea, who's been very faithfully recording these services. I want to thank Colleen for getting communion ready this morning. Dave for being here and singing. Mike, constant presence, been very much appreciated. Dan, your gathering together of all the musicians and music has been wonderful. Aylis for running the AV stuff. Courtney for putting everything together and all the special touches. I especially still like the stunt driving one, but the goat was a close second. And Penny, thank you very much as well for being here this morning. Also want to say Happy Easter to everybody at home. Am I forgetting something? Oh, yes, the cookies as well. Elaine Fletcher made the cookies, and so we brought them to church this morning as a little decoration. Because it's one of the problems, you see, when you have someone like me having to make things look pretty, it's not going to happen. I'm sure there are other ministers where there's flowers and all kinds of stuff. That didn't even cross my mind, folks. I'm sorry. All you got was a pink jacket. That's it. That's the best I could do. Anyway, I also want to say Happy Easter to all the folks who are at home. I hope that whatever you're doing, small gathering, just by yourself, neighbors down the hallway, waving at people across the lawn, whatever you're doing, I hope it gives you some peace and some comfort and happiness to know that we come here for you so that there's some normalcy in your life, that the church is being used, and that you are included in our thoughts all the time. And I also want to say, too, this could be good news or bad news. You can put it however you want. I do not consider that I am physically doing much these days for the church. So I may have to put my retirement off for a whole other year now, right? Because what's this, right? So that this may be stretched out. This may be a no-do year, like a no-fly year. So next year may be the counting year. So we shall see. Anyway, we are going to sing Jesus Christ is Risen Today.
Jesus Christ is risen today. Hallelujah. Our triumphant holy day. Hallelujah. Who did once upon the cross, hallelujah, suffer to redeem our loss, hallelujah. Hymns of praise and let us sing, hallelujah, unto Christ our heavenly King, hallelujah, who endured the cross and grave, hallelujah, sinners to redeem and save, hallelujah. But the pains which Lent endured, hallelujah, our salvation hath procured, hallelujah. Thou above the skies is King, hallelujah, where the angels ever sing, hallelujah. Sing we to the God above, hallelujah. Praise eternal as God's love, hallelujah. Praise our God, ye heavenly hosts, hallelujah. Praise the Son and Holy Ghost, hallelujah.
And now may the peace of God, which surpasses all human understanding, keep watch over our bodies and souls, minds and hearts, this day and forevermore. Amen.